I never thought I'd discover something as absurd as a clubhouse built on my property without my knowledge. But life has a way of throwing curveballs at the most unexpected moments. It started 6 years ago when I moved into what I believed was a peaceful suburb in Scottsdale, Arizona, a decision that would lead me down a rabbit hole of homeowner association drama, legal battles, and ultimately, sweet justice. My name is Quinn Saunders, and I purchased my dream home in the Saguaro Sunset community in 2019. The property was perfect 3 bedrooms, a spacious backyard that extended to a small hill overlooking the desert landscape, and enough distance from neighbors to enjoy privacy without feeling isolated. The listing mentioned HOA fees, which I reluctantly accepted as part of suburban life, though I've always been wary of organizations that dictate what you can do with your own property. Within a week of moving in, I met Patricia Wilson, the president of our HOA. She was in her 50s with perfectly coiffed blonde hair, perpetually pursed lips, and a voice that could strip paint off walls. "Quinn," she said, standing at my doorstep with a clipboard and a forced smile, "we're so pleased to welcome you to Saguaro Sunset. I've brought your welcome packet and a copy of our community guidelines." The welcome packet was a 3-inch binder filled with rules, restrictions, and regulations. Everything from approved exterior paint colors to the maximum height of garden gnomes was meticulously documented. "Thanks," I said, accepting the binder with feigned enthusiasm. "I'll be sure to give this a thorough read." Patricia's smile tightened. "Please do. We take our guidelines very seriously here. The monthly meeting is next Tuesday at 7 p.m. Attendance is strongly encouraged." I nodded politely and closed the door, tossing the binder onto my kitchen counter. My job as a software engineer kept me busy enough without adding HOA meetings to my schedule. Little did I know that skipping those meetings would have significant consequences. For the first few months, I went about renovating the interior of my home, paying little attention to the HOA beyond writing the monthly check for dues. I traveled frequently for work, spending weeks at a time away from home, which made it easy to ignore the community politics brewing around me. It was during one of my returns from a business trip to Seattle that I noticed something strange. From my kitchen window, I could see construction vehicles on the hill at the far end of my property. Curious and concerned, I walked out to investigate. As I approached, I found a team of workers laying a foundation for what appeared to be a substantial structure. A sign was posted nearby. "Future site of the Saguaro Sunset Community Clubhouse, opening summer 2020. I was confused. According to my property documents, this land belonged to me. I approached a worker who appeared to be supervising the project. "Excuse me, what's going on here?" I asked. The foreman looked up from his blueprints. "We're building the community clubhouse. Should be done in about 4 months. "But this is my property," I said, pulling out my phone to show him the property line app I downloaded when I bought the house. He shrugged. "Talk to the HOA. We're just following orders and the permits we were given." Frustrated, I called Patricia immediately, but she didn't answer. I left a message demanding an explanation and then contacted the HOA's management company. The representative seemed confused by my concerns. "Our records show that the land was donated to the community by the previous owner," she said. "It's zoned for recreational use." "That's impossible," I replied. "I have the deed and property survey right here. The land extends 50 feet beyond that hill." "Sir, I suggest you check your documents again. Our records are quite clear." I hung up, fuming, and called my real estate attorney, Marcus Hendricks. He agreed to look into the matter immediately, but cautioned that stopping construction would require a court order, which could take time. The next day, Patricia finally returned my call, her tone dripping with condescension. "Quinn, dear, there seems to be some confusion. That land has always been community property. It was allocated for recreational use in the original development plan. My deed says otherwise, Patricia. I want construction stopped immediately until we can sort this out. I'm afraid that's not possible." The project is already underway and we've invested a significant amount of the community's funds. Besides, it will increase all our property values. It's my land, I insisted. You can't just build on it without my permission. We have all the necessary permits, she replied smoothly. If you had attended the meetings, you would have been aware of our plans. This was approved by the board months ago. Before I could respond, she added, I need to go now. We can discuss this at the next meeting if you're concerned. I immediately called Marcus again, who advised me to gather all my property documents. We discovered a disturbing discrepancy. The property lines recorded with the county didn't match what was in my deed. Someone had altered the records shortly after I purchased the home, reducing my lot size and designating the hill as community property. This is fraud, Marcus said bluntly, but proving it and stopping construction will take time. The HOA has filed all the proper paperwork, even if it was based on falsified documents. Marcus filed an emergency injunction to halt construction, but the judge ruled against us, citing the apparent legality of the permits and the substantial investment already made. Our only option was to pursue a full lawsuit which could take years to resolve. You have a strong case, Marcus assured me, but these things move slowly. In the meantime, construction will continue. I was livid. My property was being stolen right in front of me, and there seemed to be nothing I could do about it. Over the next few months, I watched as my land was transformed into a community clubhouse, complete with a swimming pool, tennis court, and meeting rooms. Patricia seemed to take particular pleasure in updating me on the progress whenever we crossed paths. The roof is going on next week, she'd say with a smile that never reached her eyes. It's going to be such an asset to our community. By summer 2020, the clubhouse was complete, a 5,000 square foot monument to the HOA's overreach, sitting on what should have been my private property. The grand opening was scheduled for July 4th, with a community barbecue and pool party. I declined my invitation, instead spending the day with my attorney reviewing our legal options. The lawsuit was proceeding, but COVID-19 had slowed the court system to a crawl. It could be years before we got a resolution. There's another approach we could take, Marcus suggested. If we can prove the records were deliberately falsified, we could pursue criminal charges against whoever altered them. This strategy required patience and investigation. Marcus hired a forensic document examiner who specialized in real estate fraud, and we began the painstaking process of tracking down who had accessed and modified my property records. Meanwhile, the clubhouse became the center of community activity. From my home, I could hear the splash of swimmers, the thwack of tennis balls, and the chatter of neighbors enjoying what should have been my private hillside. It was salt in an open wound. Patricia made a point of mentioning the clubhouse's success at every opportunity. We've already had 3 wedding receptions booked, she told me one afternoon as I was collecting my mail. The rental fees are helping to offset the construction costs. The revelation that they were renting out the clubhouse for profit was another twist of the knife. Not only had they built on my land without permission, but they were now generating revenue from it. As the months turned into years, my anger evolved into calculated patience. The legal process moved forward, gradually uncovering evidence of the fraud. Through diligent investigation, we discovered that Patricia had a brother-in-law who worked in the county records office. Phone records showed multiple calls between them around the time the property lines were altered. By 2023, we had built a solid case. The forensic examiner found digital fingerprints linking Patricia's brother-in-law to the altered documents, and witness testimony confirmed that Patricia had orchestrated the scheme. She had apparently coveted the hillside location for years, and saw my frequent absences as an opportunity to claim it for the HOA. In spring 2023, the court finally ruled in my favor. Judge Alina Martinez was unequivocal in her decision. The land belonged to me, the records had been fraudulently altered, and the HOA had no right to build on my property. "The evidence of deliberate fraud is overwhelming," she stated. "The property in question is hereby returned to Mr. Saunders, with all structures thereon becoming his legal property." The courtroom erupted in gasps and murmurs. Patricia's face turned a shade of red I hadn't thought humanly possible. Her attorney immediately requested a stay of judgment pending appeal, but it was denied. As we left the courthouse, Marcus clapped me on the shoulder. "Congratulations, Quinn. The clubhouse is yours. You can have it demolished if you want, or what?" I asked, already seeing the gleam in his eye. "Or you could keep it. The HOA spent over $1 million building a state-of-the-art facility on your land. You could use it yourself, sell it, or even rent it back to them." The idea took root in my mind. After 5 years of watching the community enjoy what was rightfully mine, perhaps there was a way to turn this situation to my advantage. The HOA board called an emergency meeting that evening, which I attended with Marcus beside me. The community room was packed with residents, many of whom had no idea about the fraudulent origins of their beloved clubhouse. Patricia stood at the podium, her voice strained as she explained the court's decision. "Mr. Saunders has won his lawsuit. According to the judge, the clubhouse is now legally his property." The room erupted in angry questions and accusations, most directed at me. I waited for the noise to die down before addressing the crowd. "I understand you're upset," I said calmly. "You've enjoyed this facility for 5 years, not knowing it was built on stolen land. I'm not here to punish the community for the actions of a few. I'm willing to allow continued use of the clubhouse under certain conditions." The room quieted as I laid out my proposal. I would lease the clubhouse back to the HOA for a reasonable monthly fee, with the stipulation that Patricia and anyone else involved in the fraud resign from the board immediately. "Additionally," I continued, "I will require a formal apology and acknowledgement of wrongdoing to be published in the community newsletter and sent to every resident." Nancy Reynolds, a board member who had always seemed uncomfortable with Patricia's leadership, was the first to speak. "These terms seem fair, given the circumstances. Patricia, did you really falsify documents to build on Quinn's land?" All eyes turned to Patricia, who was now cornered. "I did what was best for the community," she said defensively. "That hillside was perfect for a clubhouse, and he was never even here to use it." Her admission sent another wave of murmurs through the room. It was clear that most residents had no idea about the deception and were shocked to learn the truth. After hours of heated discussion, the board voted to accept my terms, with only Patricia and her closest allies opposing. She stormed out of the meeting, threatening further legal action, but her position had become untenable. By the end of the week, she and 2 other board members had resigned. The new board, led by Nancy Reynolds, signed a 5-year lease agreement for the clubhouse at $8,000 per month, less than they had been collecting in rental fees, but still a significant income for me. The arrangement included provisions for maintenance, insurance, and future renovations. As promised, a formal apology was published in the community newsletter, detailing how Patricia and her accomplices had manipulated records to steal my land. The revelation sent shockwaves through the community and led to a complete overhaul of how the HOA operated. Patricia's legal troubles were just beginning. Based on our evidence, the county prosecutor filed criminal charges against her and her brother-in-law for fraud and tampering with public records. They both eventually accepted plea deals that included probation, community service, and significant fines. For the next year, I watched as the community adapted to the new reality. The clubhouse continued to function as it had before, hosting events, providing recreation, and serving as a gathering place. The only difference was that now I was the landlord, receiving a monthly check that more than covered my mortgage. But I wasn't content to simply collect rent. The experience had shown me how vulnerable homeowners could be to HOA overreach, and I wanted to use my unexpected position to create positive change. I began attending HOA meetings regularly, not as an antagonist, but as a collaborative partner. Working with Nancy and the new board, we rewrote many of the restrictive guidelines that had made life difficult for residents. Gone were the arbitrary rules about holiday decorations, lawn ornaments, and paint colors. In their place, we established reasonable standards that protected property values without micromanaging homeowners' lives. The clubhouse became a symbol of the community's transformation. What had been built through deception became a gathering place for honest dialogue about how neighbors could live together respectfully. We established a community garden on part of the hillside, started a youth mentoring program in the clubhouse, and even created a dispute resolution committee to address conflicts before they escalated to lawsuits. One afternoon in early 2024, as I was checking on some maintenance issues at the clubhouse, I ran into Amelia Zimmerman, a new resident who had moved in after all the drama had unfolded. She was using the pool with her 2 young children, seemingly unaware of the facility's contentious history. "This place is amazing," she said as we chatted. "It's one of the reasons we chose this neighborhood. Not many communities have such a beautiful clubhouse." I smiled, deciding not to burden her with the full story. "It is special," I agreed, "though it came about in an unusual way." "Oh, how so?" she asked. "Let's just say it's a long story about property rights, community responsibility, and learning to be better neighbors," I replied. "Maybe I'll tell you sometime over coffee." As I walked back to my house, I reflected on how differently things might have turned out. I could have demanded the clubhouse be demolished out of spite. I could have sold the land to a developer. I could have excluded the community entirely. Instead, I found a solution that benefited everyone while still respecting my property rights. The 5-year mark since the clubhouse's construction passed in July 2025, coinciding with the end of our initial lease agreement. The HOA, now functioning as a responsible and transparent organization, approached me about renewing the lease. "We'd like to extend for another 5 years," Nancy said during our meeting. "The arrangement has worked well for everyone." I had been considering my options. The rental income was substantial, and I had grown to appreciate being part of a community that had learned from its mistakes. At the same time, I had received offers from private entities interested in purchasing the facility for various uses. "I've received some interesting proposals," I told Nancy. "A health club chain wants to buy it outright, and there's a corporate retreat company interested in a long-term lease at twice what the HOA is paying." Nancy's face fell. "I understand you need to do what's best for you financially. After what happened, no one would blame you." I let her anxiety build for a moment before smiling. "But that's not what I'm going to do." I presented my counter-proposal. I would extend the HOA's lease for another 5 years, but with a twist. 20% of the rental income would go into a community improvement fund, administered jointly by me and the board. The fund would support projects that benefited all residents, particularly those who couldn't afford to pay for amenity upgrades through increased HOA dues. "This way, everyone wins," I explained. "I still receive income from my property, the community keeps its clubhouse, and we build something better together than any of us could separately." Nancy was visibly relieved and excited by the idea. "That's more than fair. I think the board will approve this unanimously." And they did. The new agreement was signed the following week, with enthusiastic support from residents who had come to see the clubhouse saga as a turning point in their community's history. Patricia, I heard, had moved to a neighborhood without an HOA in a different part of Scottsdale. Her legal troubles had followed her, making it difficult to find employment in real estate or property management, the fields where she had previously worked. Occasionally, I would spot her name in the local news as she completed her community service hours. As for her accomplices, most had faded into obscurity after paying their fines and serving probation. The brother-in-law lost his job at the county records office and, according to local gossip, had moved to Nevada to start over. The story of Saguaro Sunset's clubhouse became something of a cautionary tale in HOA circles throughout Arizona. Real estate attorneys cited our case in seminars about proper governance and the limits of HOA authority. Property records offices implemented new security measures to prevent similar fraud, and homeowners became more vigilant about attending meetings and reviewing documents before signing them. For me, the experience changed how I viewed property ownership and community. What began as a battle over land evolved into a lesson about finding balance between individual rights and collective benefits. The hillside that I had once envisioned as a private retreat became something more valuable. A place where neighbors connected, children played, and a community healed from the wounds of betrayal. The revenue from leasing the clubhouse allowed me to reduce my work schedule, giving me time to pursue other interests. I started a blog about HOA issues that quickly gained a following among homeowners facing similar challenges. I was invited to speak at conferences about property rights and community governance. What had begun as a personal fight for justice became a platform for broader change. In late 2025, I received an unexpected visitor. It was Marcus, my attorney, who had stopped by with a bottle of scotch to celebrate the 5-year anniversary of our court victory. "I've been meaning to ask you something," he said as we sat on my back patio, overlooking the clubhouse lights twinkling in the evening darkness. "Why didn't you just take the money from that health club chain? It was substantially more than what the HOA is paying." I considered the question as I swirled the amber liquid in my glass. At first, it was about justice making right what had been wronged. But somewhere along the way, it became about something else. "Which is," Marcus prompted, "building something better than what was there before," I replied. "The clubhouse was created through deception, but now it stands for transparency and cooperation." "That's worth more than the extra rental income." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "Not many people would see it that way after being wronged." "I had 5 years to think about it," I said with a laugh. Watching them use my land while the case dragged on gave me plenty of time to consider all the angles. We toasted to unexpected outcomes and lessons learned the hard way. As Marcus left that evening, he paused at the door. "You know, Quinn, in all my years of practicing law, I've never seen someone turn a property dispute into community revival. It's quite remarkable." I shrugged modestly. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's creating something your adversaries never could. The following weekend, I attended a community barbecue at the clubhouse. Children splashed in the pool while their parents chatted on the patio. A group of retirees played cards in the shade of the pergola I had added last year. Nancy waved me over to the grill where she was turning hamburgers alongside her husband. "The hero arrives," she said with a grin. "Everyone," Quinn brought his famous guacamole. As neighbors greeted me warmly, I felt a sense of belonging that had been absent when I first moved in. The clubhouse that had once symbolized theft and deception had transformed into the heart of a thriving community. Later that evening, as the gathering wound down and the sunset painted the desert in hues of orange and purple, I found myself alone on the hillside, looking down at what had become of my stolen land. The journey from victim to landlord to community partner had been unexpected but ultimately rewarding. A young couple approached, introducing themselves as new residents. "We've heard the story about how you ended up owning the clubhouse," the husband said. "It's pretty incredible how it all worked out." His wife nodded in agreement. "Most people would have been bitter, but you turned it into something positive for everyone." I smiled, remembering the anger I had felt watching the construction crews break ground years ago. "Sometimes life gives you an opportunity disguised as a problem," I said. "The trick is recognizing it." As they walked away, I took a final look at the facility that had caused so much conflict and eventually healing. The clubhouse stood as a testament to resilience and reinvention, not just mine, but the community's as well. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the tennis courts and pool deck. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities. But for now, I was content knowing that what had begun as a battle over property lines had transformed into something far more valuable. A blueprint for how neighbors could wrong one another and still find a path to redemption. The clubhouse lights illuminated the gathering darkness, a beacon of what could be built on the foundation of second chances. And as I walked back to my home, I couldn't help but think that sometimes the most valuable property isn't measured in square footage or market value, but in the connections it creates and the community it sustains. Patricia Wilson had wanted to build a clubhouse. What she ended up constructing, though unwittingly, was something far more significant. A case study in how justice, forgiveness, and common purpose could transform a neighborhood. And for that, ironically, I owed her a debt of gratitude, one that I repaid every month by using her former kingdom not as a weapon of retribution, but as a tool for community building. The monthly rental checks were nice, certainly, but the true profit came in the form of a neighborhood that had learned to value both individual rights and collective responsibility. As I reached my front door, I turned for one last look at the clubhouse on the hill. In the 5 years since it was built, and the 2 years since I had gained legal ownership, it had evolved from a symbol of overreach to an emblem of renewal. The lights from the evening's gathering still shone against the desert night, illuminating not just a building, but a community's journey from broken to whole. And that, I realized, was worth more than any property line could define or any deed could convey. It was a reminder that sometimes the most valuable things we own aren't things at all, but the relationships we build and the communities we create, even when they begin with someone building a clubhouse on your land without permission.